Hi, I'm Zoe Alexander, and this is Crash Course Black American History. Today we're going to be talking about Black abolitionists, specifically Henry Highland Garnet. On December 23rd in 1815, Henry Highland was born into slavery to Henrietta and George Trusty in Kent County, Maryland. When he was a child, him and his parents escaped slavery using the Underground Railroad and settled in New York City in 1825. Once they arrived in New York, Garnet joined the African Free School on Mott Street until 1826, where he met James McCune Smith, Alexander Crummell, as well as others. Until the school was destroyed by white supremacists, terrorists, in 1835, Garnet attended Noyes Academy in New Hampshire. Highland Garnet's experiences and education as a youth would allow him to go on and become an advocate for the abolitionist movement and a minister until his death in 1882. It is important to note that Garnet was into ministry as well as many others during this time period who were also involved in the abolitionist movement. In 1834, Garnet and his friends came together to create the Garrison Literary and Benevolent Association, and together they were able to gather 150 African Americans under the age of 20 in their very first meeting. In 1843, Garnet became a minister and spoke to the delegates of the National Negro Convention in Buffalo, New York, where he called for a slave revolt against plantation owners in the South. Back in 1828 and 1829, Garnet made 2 voyages to Cuba where he advocated to abolish slavery. He even formed the Cuban Anti-Slavery Committee later on in 1872. Garnet gave his most famous speech in 1843 with an address to the slaves of the United States of America, where he openly told slaves to rebel against their masters. Frederick Douglass criticized the speech while his close friend James McCune Smith admired it. Douglass accused Garnet of quote-unquote being dishonestly motivated and of only using the parts of the Bibles that he thought would help him achieve his goals. As Garnet grew older, he took a more radical position where he supported the colonization movement. Additionally, he would travel to places like England and Jamaica where he would give speeches. Let's go to the thought bubble. Now that we've seen how influential Garnet was and his part in the abolitionist movement, we can now examine the impact of his life's work on a global scale during his lifetime. Not only did Garnet play a part in creating the Cuban Anti-Slavery Committee, but he also met with Cuban liberation leaders to form an international coalition to spread emancipation across the globe. When Garnet spoke in New York City, he urged people to connect the Black freedom struggle with the liberation movements in Latin America, which helped advance the cause of the United States recognizing the Republic of Cuba. Because Garnet took a more radical position at times, one time he was a target of a working-class mob during the summer of 1863. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Garnet was not just an abolitionist in the United States. He also had a more international approach, and sometimes he took on more radical stances, which caused him to be disliked by some but still effective. Garnet had major achievements, such as being named the ambassador to Liberia in 1881, a year before he died, and being a renowned speaker. It is important to note that Garnet did support women's suffrage, but he was not as vocal about the issue as he was for equal rights for African Americans around the world. Abraham Lincoln invited Garnet to the Capitol to give a speech. It was here that he gave the speech, "Let the Monster Perish," which allowed him to make history as the first African American to deliver a sermon in the building. In 1876, Garnet began to struggle with both physical and mental decline and expressed the idea that he wanted to die on African soil. When he did die, he was given a state funeral by the Liberian government. Overall, the speeches and sermons was what contributed most to Garnet's lasting impacts, not just as a minister, but also as an abolitionist who spoke out to seek freedom for African Americans globally. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This Crash Course video was brought to you by Zoe Alexander and her animation team.